Hello, welcome back to the Fashion Nap. Today I am here with a guest that I'm super excited about, Ari Seth Cohen of Advanced Style. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited. I love what you do, and I'm excited for the fun interview.
Well, hopefully it will be a fun one, and I'm not going to keep you for hours and hours because I have so many things that I want to ask you. But you really do it all. You're an author, you've got documentary, you're a photographer. Oh, you've got a fabulous hat. One of the original bloggers, I feel like,
It started in 2008.
2008. And I love that your blog is still up also. Like you can still
Yeah,
see it.
I've been posting
Um,
lately again.
in a way, I feel like you've pioneered kind of the age diversity because what you do is present older people in a way that actually cannot be denied. Like there's no way you can look at the women and the men that you photograph and be like, oh, they're anything but incredible. But let's get into some questions. I actually made a compilation of this because usually I start by asking people how did they first get into fashion? What was their first fashion memory? And nine times out of 10, the person will say, it was my grandmother. What
Yeah.
do you think it is about grandmothers that has such an influence on the other people in their family?
Well, for me, I had two fabulous grandmothers. One grandmother, Helen, was the fashion plate. She used to wear Escada suits with men's ties and was always dressed to the nines and like a huge influence on me. But my other grandmother, Bluma, it was more her encouragement of my own creativity and self-expression that got me interested in dressing up and taking joy and playing with clothes and expressing my creativity that way. She was a librarian, and so we'd go to the library and check out like stacks of books and get, inspiration from that. But then also, I think because I was so fascinated with her as a person, I would look through her old scrapbooks and see women in the 1930s all dressed up in these incredible outfits, and they didn't have a lot of money. She grew up in Iowa, but everyone looked so elegant and individual because things were like one of a kind and handmade. And I think that elegance really like stuck. Also, we would watch old movies together, and I loved the way, old Hollywood glamour and just the way people dressed. And so she saw me going through her jewelry drawers and then my grandfather's clothes and trying on his hats and shirts and wearing them to elementary school. And, she didn't make me feel bad about that. She really encouraged me to be a creative person who is very self-expressive.
Well, we have another guest entering the chat. That's so
And
fab that you had it on both sides, that creativity and that inspiration and encouragement. That's amazing.
yeah, and really, I think there's something special about grandmothers because they obviously come from such a different time than, their grandchildren. And so there's so much wisdom that can be learned from them, but also the relationship sometimes isn't as serious because they're not fully responsible. And so they can kind of push their grandchildren in directions, like positive directions that maybe their parents might be a little like skeptical or fearful of doing. And so my grandmother just let me do, really express and really create and really had the time to do that because she was retired. She retired when I was, born because she wanted to spend time with me.
Well, that's lovely. And I feel like time is a big thing as well. I guess people's parents, they're working, they're trying to get you to school, get you here and
Yeah.
there. The grandparent could just be like, let's go to the library. Judith, can you hear us?
Oh, you see me?
We don't see you, but we can hear you.
This is a hat that Judith got me.
Oh,
Oh,
we've got a
yes.
rotation.
I'm in Tina's car in Boston. Oh, yay, you're wearing the Stetson.
This is the best birthday present I've ever received.
I can see that. And it looks good with the cream on your shirt also.
Judith and I buy each other hats wherever we go. We go antiquing and hats. I think hats is one of the reasons why we became such good friends.
I was going to ask how you guys met and became friends.
Should we tell the real story? I think we
Oh,
should.
yeah, you could
I
tell the
want
Parts
the
real
real
story.
parts of
story.
parts of it. Well, you
Well,
go ahead.
well, we first met in 2010 in November when I was in New York visiting my daughter, and I was going to have lunch with Deborah, one of Ari's wonderful what would you muse, a wonderful muse. And unbeknownst to me, he brought Ari along for lunch. We had arranged to have lunch and spent the day, which was so much fun. But you can take it from there, Ari. That was our first
No,
meeting.
I mean Judith started her blog in 2010 and I started mine in 2008. And well, I don't want to speak for you, but you told me you were inspired by advanced style
Yes,
music.
yes, yes, yes. He was the inspiration for starting my blog because I saw that his subjects were older people dressed up, and that's what I love to do. And I was living in an area where I would do it, but nobody else did it, and it was like isolating. And
Mm.
am I crazy? And those kinds of thoughts would go through my head, but it didn't stop me, obviously. I worked as a psychiatric nurse and didn't have to wear uniforms, but I would wear hats. And sometimes it was hard to keep a job. So I would just change jobs because I was a nurse and could do that. So, yeah, we met. That's why I started my blog. And then also my husband was my photographer and he encouraged me. And Ari and I would meet when I went to New York, but we really didn't know each other that well, nor were we really like friends, I would say.
Yeah.
More acquaintance, don't you think, Ari?
Oh, I always loved what Judith wore and what she presented. And for me, like this was a time where a lot of people were starting to blog or blogging already, but I love Judith's message. She was talking about her journey going through her husband Nelson getting sick with cancer and how they use creativity and dressing up to sort of kind of heal and create joyful moments like during chemo and all sorts of things and like had this collaboration together. So she always like her project was always very meaningful. But I always looked at her as this like very proper, perfect, and I'm more silly. Uh and then it wasn't, we talk on the phone, we get together, but then in 2019 we did a conference together in Chicago, and we realized we had the same energy for thrifting and vintage to the point where Judith forgot to turn off her car because we pulled over at a vintage store, and it was like almost like it kept going. I was like, "Judith, you have to turn the engine off. We're rolling." We
I
jumped
was
out of
so
the car.
excited and hyperventilating.
Yeah. We had the best time, and during COVID, we really got to be like best friends because we had these chats. We had this thing on Friday nights where we would continue to dress up every Friday night and have Zoom calls and dance and try to get through, those crazy times together. And then we were also both being very cautious because of people in our life, and so we would visit each other when we could, and yeah, and now we've just been having a blast together. And Judith turned 80, and we celebrated in Palm Springs. And we love to go vintage shopping together and share about aging. And I get so much inspiration from her.
Such a
And
beautiful
Ari, of course,
story.
inspires me all the time. And it was a gold lame 80th birthday, gold lame gown and turban.
I saw this picture.
Oh, that one is so great. That's one of my favorites.
We usually
I
trade
love
hats
that you're
for you
doing a
every
hat
bit.
show.
I know. I feel like I'm going to put a little counter for how many hats can we get in the whole video.
Yeah. Actually, it
Well,
could have been a few more, but
oh, that one is so great. So one of
Every
my,
year I say I'm going to become a hat wearer. I just find it very hard with all this hair to find the right hat. Is there
yeah,
and
but
any,
you
your
have such great hair.
thank you. Is there any advice for finding the right hat? Or you just make it the right hat by wearing it?
you'll have to come over to Judith's hat room and we'll
Okay.
experiment.
I had
Yes.
one hat that I loved. It was like a deep red, like pillbox hat with the veil, and I lent it
Yeah.
to somebody.
Oh.
I wore it in New Year's Eve, I think it was 2009, and I lent it to a
Oh.
friend. I remember that hat so clearly. I wore it once, and then I let someone borrow it, and they got drunk and fell asleep on the train
Yeah.
and got their whole bag stolen with my hat inside. That was the one hat I've ever loved.
That's the first rule of a good hat. Never lend it to your
Yeah, and
friends.
that's what I learned on my first
I
hat.
know there have been some hats that are destroyed because I did that. Um, but on the other hand, sometimes I just want to share them so people can understand how important they are and how they help you get a better seat at a restaurant, and people treat you differently depending, and they weed people out because some people don't like hats and don't like that I'm wearing them. So they're not going to come up and talk to me. But the people that do come up and talk to me, because hats are a conversation starter, that's the person I would like to be connected with. So they
So it's
weed
And
kind of like a
people out.
radar.
that's a big part of advanced style is visibility, especially as you get older. And so like dressing up is not just a superficial thing. It really is like almost a political statement of like
Yes.
not invisible. And also it creates community and conversation and connection with each other at
Mhm.
all generations. And that's what I love about it.
So what I really like about you two's story of how you became friends, and even Judith, how you started your blog like with your husband. It was a more of a serious time, but you used
Right.
fashion as that vessel. Is I think, and I'm sure you probably all can relate, being fashion people, when you meet people that maybe don't understand and they hear that you're in fashion or you love to dress, they think it's quite shallow and like you just it's a bit silly, but actually it can be a very meaningful thing and a very emotional thing. And like just both of you with your platforms, like the community you've created for yourselves, the way you work with your husband. I just think it's like a really important
Right.
statement for people to hear that it's more than just clothes.
Yes, having found advanced style and the message has
Mm.
totally changed my life. I would not be where I am right now because I really appreciate aging as opposed to being fearful. Um, and I think that helps keep me. Oh, here we have another one.
Ooh, okay,
That's
this
a
is a bit of me.
favorite. That is a great one. Nothing like sparkle.
In all your years of knowing each other and your more recent years of being like certified friends, is there anything you've never asked Ari before?
I know that your grandmother inspired you, but who was the very first subject of your project now that you look back?
I think the subjects kind of existed before the project. So
Oh,
I grew up in San Diego. And my mom and grandmother loved to shop, and we always had a lot of fun antiquing and thrift store shopping and vintage shopping. But so they really encouraged me. But my mom was always interested in more eccentric characters, like Zandra Rhodes
yes.
lived in San Diego and in London, and so we would see her at department stores. And my mom would say, as a very little boy, "Do you know that's Sandra Rhodes?" And my mom was
Oh,
obsessed with her. Now we've become friends with her and love her. But and then there was this other woman who owned a winery in San Diego, and she had this hair that went like this and like the eyeshadow because San Diego wasn't really known for dressing, but these two women were. And then there was a vintage store in San Diego called Wear It Against Sam, and this woman named Barbara. I remember as like a teenager getting my first official zoot suit, like from the 1940s. And she had like purple hair, like an updo, and like vintage suit and jewelry, and like was so elegant. And so those kind of early people kind of were the inspiration. And then I used to draw pictures of fabulously dressed older women. Like at 4 and 5 years old, I made a little book of like these women who didn't even really exist. And then when I moved to New York, I should say that my grandmother encouraged me to move to New York when I was young because she studied at Columbia University and always told me if I wanted to be creative, I should move to New York City. And so when she passed away after, me helping to take care of her, I moved to New York with this deep sense of loss. And I would see these women on the street that were sort of reminiscent of the drawings that I made as a little kid. I didn't even know they existed, women like this. And so it was like this kind of like very strange thing that happened where I saw like my visions coming true from
ah,
my childhood on the street. This woman named Mimi Waddell, who I talk about a lot. So my grandmother had passed away. I was like kind of, at a loss. She was my best friend and really my guide and everything to me. And before moving to New York, I went to go see a film called Hats Off, starring this woman named Mimi Waddell, who was in her 90s. She lived on the Upper West Side, and it was a documentary about her. And she was there traveling with the documentary. She started an acting and modeling career in her 70s and like had done campaigns for um Juicy Couture and a few other brands, like really gorgeous, amazing woman. And so I went up to her after the movie and I said, "I'm moving to New York. I'd love to be your friend." And she gave me her card. And so I called her when I got to New York, but she didn't answer the phone. And then I started interning for a fashion brand, and I told her that I could get her on in a runway show, and then she answered the phone right away. And she became kind of my first muse, or like my first like like just that's like energy that I was looking for in New York, from an older person. I never photographed her because I hadn't really started the project when I first moved. And one of the things she said that I always loved, which you could relate to, is the only thing romantic left in life is a hat.
Oh, that gave me goosebumps.
And then I just realized, like, why are these women not being paid attention to in fashion and advertising? And like, I see younger women, this was around the time where the Olsen twins were like wearing the big glasses, and Rachel Zoe was like kind of styling people and like
Right.
this vision of like eccentric Upper East Side, but like those women weren't being celebrated or sort of recognized in fashion. And also a lot of my girlfriends who were starting to turn like 30 were already worrying about their first gray hairs or like the first little wrinkle that appeared. And I was like, look at these women, like we should not be fearful of getting older. We should like look forward to it, embrace it. That's the long story.
Okay.
I knew that you did drawings and so on, but I didn't. It's almost like you manifested what you were doing at the age of
Yeah.
4 when you were in New York. That's a beautiful story.
Thank you.
Wow. Judith, do you have one piece of fashion wisdom to leave us with?
Thank you for inviting me. And my piece of fashion advice is it's important to wear what we love to wear and take risks, experiment, and never do something or never stop doing something because you think you're too old.
Thank you so
Yes.
much, Judith, and I will talk to you
Thank you
soon.
for
See you in New
inviting me.
York.
Can't wait to have you back. Back to you, and I love the hat. So the last question I asked you is obviously about your grandmother, but off the back of that question, what I love also about the people that you photograph, not everybody over a certain age is a grandma. It's nice to see like what the other side of these unconventional life choices look like, because younger people are so scared to not have children or not do this
Mhm.
or not. I really like that people can come to your accounts and see there is life no matter what path you take, and you can thrive and be
Oh,
fabulous and have a
yeah.
great time. The question part of this question is, once you started seeking out more muses, what was your goal with it, with Advanced Style?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to say that yeah, I wanted to represent different forms of growing older and different journeys and kind of break down the stereotype of this kind of grandma figure that was also sort of thought of as they get older as one of this image of decline, or just everything I saw in the media was just very negative or uninspiring about aging, but it wasn't really what I was seeing, whether you were a grandmother or not. I was seeing people who were rediscovering themselves as they've gotten older, having more time for their creativity, their personal expression, using their wisdom to kind of empower them to like be fully themselves. And so I think initially when I started the project, it was sort of selfish. It was because I lost my grandmother and I wanted to heal from the loss. So I was looking for friends and guides and like people like her to kind of help me through the next part of my, life journey. And then I started to hear from my friends how they were worrying about getting older. And I knew that these women that I was photographing and interviewing had the power to like make people less fearful about getting older. And then as I was doing the project, I started to hear from women in their 40s and up saying how they started to feel invisible at a certain point in their lives, and how the women that I was photographing allowed them to feel the permission to dress up and feel free and express themselves, and also find who they are through style. And so, um, yeah, the goal was really just to make people feel good in their own skin, to have like feel like they had a sense of community and a kinship, and also like to create intergenerational conversations and relationships, and kind of create a archive of images that hadn't been seen before, like to show aging in a different way than it had been shown. And so it was really amazing when brands and, the runways, like all these people started to respond and use the women that I was photographing or other women in fashion, older women.
Did an interview with another girl called Jess. And I don't remember if I left it in the edit or not, but we were talking about this because she loves to chat to all her neighbors and like sort of seeks out very different types of people because she thinks that's part of the human experience. So we were saying it's kind of like a lost thing in a lot of parts of Western society. Like up until last year, I was working in like a local salon. A lot of my clients were like 70 and up. And I used to love hearing from them. And they had like more thriving social lives than I did. They were always off here, off there. Um,
Love Judith.
yeah, yeah. She's in Boston. She's from the car. We can't even track her down for a call. She's in transit. There would be I remember there was this one woman I used to do the nails of, and she would always be like, "Oh, they've just opened Tiffany just opened a bar in Harrods. Oh, what, you haven't heard about it yet? Oh, well, I've already been 3 times." I'm like, "Oh God, I need to keep up with
That
her."
was
She knew everything.
that was great in New York because all the women were like, come to this art show or this party or,
Hmm.
this talk. And so, I had all these people who were like guiding my social life.
Yeah, I live in like a area. I don't know how much you know about the UK, but the area I live in is called Essex, and it's kind of known for like very, like, I guess it's similar. It's like maybe it's similar to like New Jersey, maybe this kind of like very over the top type of people. But what I noticed, I've only lived here for like 4 years, but what I noticed is people really care about their appearance like their whole life. So it's very common here to see very dressed up older people, and they still come and do their hair and have full makeup and outfits and nails, and it's just the norm. But as soon as you go a bit further into London, that kind of doesn't exist anywhere. Advanced Pets is coming. Can you tell me more about this? This is your new venture. I
Sure.
know the inspiration of why you started talking to these, oh, of course, get the animal print out to these fabulous women, but where did the inspiration come from for the pets?
Um, so my first two books were really about the women and men that I was photographing all around the world. And my second book kind of explored more a deeper look into aging. And then in 2019, I made a book called Advanced Love, which was about long lasting and people, just relationships between older people. Some of them were like 60 years, some people had lost their spouse and then, met someone new, but it was just all about kind of love and the possibilities of love at an older age. And as I've been doing this now for 16 years, I really thought about what are the things that really allow people to age with great vitality. And there's so many things, right? There's creativity, there's having a passion in life, grandkids, not grandkids, just, finding the things that keep you going. And one of those things that I've always had, and that a lot of the women have, were pets, especially during the pandemic. I think our relationships to animals were even more important and continue to be so. And so, yeah, for a few years I had been photographing people and their pets, like the women that I photograph, and all sorts of new ladies and gentlemen. And I think that really it's each project is about connection and love. And this one is just about connection to our animal companions and friends, which is very important as you get older because sometimes you lose friends or a spouse, and you can have this like very gratifying, incredibly deep relationship with an animal. And so it's just, trying to kind of unpack like different things in the human experience as we get older that help with our vitality and our vibrancy. And it really comes down to love and connection. Like style does that, uh, human relationships, animal relationships, but yeah. And it all started with the love of my grandmother. So I think it's all really about love, this project.
Yeah, it seems like that's the thread that connects all the books, all of the people. Um, I guess on the surface, it just looks like this is street style, but it's actually so much deeper than that. And that's why I really love your work. Um, and to read the captions and read the stories, and you sort of like, because you see the same people again, you kind of get attached to certain characters. Um, The pets one will be super interesting. I'm excited to see that come out. What date does it come out?
It comes out on November 12th, and we're having a big launch on November 13th in New York. So I'm excited.
Okay, so if you're in New York, you know where you need to be.
The Strand Bookstore, yes.
You have photographed a lot of people since 2008. What do you think is the most notable thing that you've learned from anyone that you've photographed?
Ah, there's so many different lessons, like just like in having like these like, just approaching someone on the street and telling them you love their hat, which turns into a conversation about life and shared wisdom. Uh, Really from these women, I think they've given me the courage to like go even further into exploring like who I want to be and what I want to express to the world and like what makes me feel most comfortable and like not being fearful of, really kind of, going out and being over the top. I still probably tone it down for what I would really want to do. But I hopefully I'll get there when I'm 80 years old or hopefully before that. Yeah, I mean, they're all just like inspiring in different ways and their energy, their vitality, and kind of flipping the script on what we think about getting older. Um, and just like, I photographed women who were like starting in their 60s and then like met women who were 106 walking down the streets of New York in their, leopard print coats and high heels and going about the day. So there's been like so many. One time I was in London, a memorable moment was I saw a woman getting into a cab and I started running after her because she was wearing this incredible suit and a turban and she got in the cab a little too quick and then I was right by the window and something in me told me to like knock on the window and so I knocked on the window and I said, oh my God, I love what you're wearing and I love your turban. And she rolled down the window a little bit more and said, "Oh, darling, I always have to dress up for chemo." And I took my camera and took her photo. She said I could because she wanted to share her story with others. And yeah, it was just such a beautiful moment. And it ended up in my first book. And that moment always like stuck with me that she took the time to like roll down the window and like share this moment with me. And so during such a vulnerable time. And, she like Judith's husband, like they shared that kind of wanting to be creative and maybe like do something to feel good during such a hard time. So that was a really special moment shared with this woman. I mean, it's a very vulnerable thing to approach anyone and ask them to take their photo, especially as you getting older.
I notice when I'm trying to interview people that 'cause I've interviewed a few people that are older, but I noticed that a lot of the older people are so much faster to say yes and so much more excited and willing to like just do a call. And I think that at a certain point in life, you must just think you want to say yes to everything and just like have fun. Whereas some of the younger people that I try to talk to are maybe more hesitant and they want to see, oh, what views is it going to get and this and that. And there's so many questions and yes and no and yes. Do you find that, I don't know, people are more enthusiastic, I guess, the older you get?
When I first started, like there weren't a lot of blogs, so like
Mm.
like younger people were obviously like excited to be photographed, but the people that I was photographing did not trust being online. And so
True.
there wasn't like a lot of like being online. People didn't have Instagram. And so when I would like approach women on the Upper East Side, they would be like, "Who are you? Like, what do you want with my photo? Like, are you going to paste it on somebody else's body and put it on a website?" They always would say, I was like, "No, I'm just doing this because I love my grandmother." But yeah, it was like very challenging to get people to agree. But then there was some people like Deborah Rappaport, who we talked about, who was one of the first women I photographed, who I photographed and she invited me over to lunch and like we really got to share our stories. And so it's just like, like I said before, like some of it has to do with having more time or being more, more open to like the possibilities of what can happen. But yeah, I don't know, only because I had such a different experience with like starting out so long ago. But I think now people are so used to being
Yeah.
photographed and asked to be photographed or talked to or interviewed. So
Yeah, I didn't think of the context of it being 2008 because that was only like 8 years after like the Millennium Panic, where everyone thought the computers were going to like take over the world and we were all going to explode.
Yeah,
So it
yeah.
must have been, yeah, quite difficult to explain the
Oh,
concept.
totally.
That's one thing that I'm very inspired by from people that I talk to is like saying yes more. I spoke with Connie Girl. She said to me the only thing she doesn't turn down anything but her collar, and I loved
Yeah.
that quote.
I realize that I need to say yes more too. A lot of the women do say yes, which has like led them to have interesting opportunities in their life. Like Deborah's one of them. And kind of like yeah, definitely. I think that I'm always so skeptical. I think a lot of us are so skeptical because
Mm,
of, we live in a world where like everyone's trying to like spam us or scam us like online and like all these crazy things. But yeah, it is good. There's so many things I should have said yes to that I didn't be out of fear or just kind of not, stopping myself from doing a certain thing
yeah.
or
I was already gradually getting a bit more of a yes person, but as soon as Connie said that to me, I was like, I hear that in my head every time I get an email. I'm like, yeah, okay, I don't turn it down anything but my collar. Let's just do it and see where it goes. So I asked you what you sort of took away from the people that you photograph. What do you think that your subjects take from you? Because it's always like a mutual exchange, right? When you're sort of photographing people.
I think that like obviously there's certain people from my project that I've created these really deep relationships with. Um, I think that I come from a place of such deep respect and like kind of honoring and almost like I'm a fan of everyone that I photograph. And so I think that I tend to make people feel good because I'm celebrating them when I'm photographing them. And so a lot of the women that I have photographed, um, some of them have never like had like their photos taken or uh maybe haven't heard certain things about that kind of appreciation for a long time. So I think that hopefully I make people feel good. And then yeah, we talk and we share different ideas and wisdom, and like I've learned so much from the women that I photographed that like it's nice to talk about aging and kind of share perspectives. And so but mostly like making people feel seen, I think.
Yeah, because I guess visibility is something that came up a lot earlier, people feeling invisible. Um, Someone like Judith, obviously, she was already doing her own thing, but I'm sure there are people that you photographed that have turned that into something else. Because I know a lot of the people that I see first on your page, suddenly I see them on catwalk shows and I'll click through and they've got like 100,000 followers. They can't have all been blogging before you. I'm sure sometimes you had a hand in that.
Yeah.
You've got the confidence or understood what it was like to be online and really ran with it, which I think is a really beautiful thing.
Yeah, and then there's another whole side of like that I hear from um especially women saying, well, I want to be invisible. Like I've had to be visible my whole life and been like, I think was it Kathy Bates or something wrote an article about it, like just because of like the way that like the patriarchy and the way that women are treated and like just kind of like not wanting attention from men, that unwanted attention that they had been getting for decades, like, and it was kind of a relief to kind of like be able to let go and not have to like be seen anymore or like confronted by people. And so like there's like two sides, and really for me it's not like the visibility is just like honoring the fact that you exist and have something to share and your value in the world. So I think some people sometimes think that like when I talk about visibility that it's only like in the way that people express themselves and you have to like be loud and colorful, but it's really just about like knowing that you have a place and that we respect you and are grateful for what you contribute to the world. So
Mm. Because flamboyance is obviously great and amazing, but I think the real reason that we love it is it's just nice to see people being themselves. And
yeah.
sometimes being yourself is more understated or is more minimal, but it's still just as valid, I think, as the full regalia. It's
Oh
where it's
yeah.
coming from, right? It's if you're expressing something that's authentic and having the courage to be yourself. Because I think just thinking about some of my older clients, they would always say like after maybe like 50, a lot of their friends they would say they turn beige, and it was like where what happened because they feel pressure that that's how somebody should look at that
Yeah.
age, whereas even if you're not going to be in a leopard print hat and a gold necklace,
Yeah.
just the courage to wear something that makes you feel good and not what you think you should be wearing. I think that's
Yeah,
kind
it's
of
about not
visible.
being pressured that you have to be invisible.
Mm.
I think you should
Making
have a
that choice for
TV. I think
yourself.
you should have a TV show.
I want one, so I'm glad you said that. Well, I'm just fascinated by people. I love fashion. I love the people, just to hear everyone's story. That's why I love what you do because you're sharing stories. Um, and I can relate to what you were saying from a young age as well, that you were sort of drawn to those kind of older characters because as I started to get in the world and realize, oh, people are afraid of aging and people don't like see that as something aspirational. There was a woman that I used to see on my way to school that had the longest grey hair, and she'd always wear this like black suit or like a grey suit with like a red lip and harsh glasses. And I just thought she was like the most stunning person in the world. And I've always been a Diana Ross fan. So between those two, I was like, okay, I'm gonna peak at 80. I'm not worried about peaking when I'm 20 or
Oh
30.
yeah. Oh yeah.
But a lot of people, that's not the reality. We're getting off piece. So let me ask you another question before we get forever.
I wish we had a TV show together where we just interviewed old ladies.
This would be amazing. Someone pick it up. You have seen so many looks since 2008 to now. You have photographed like the creme de la creme of street fashion in New York and around the world. Are there any outfits that you'd put as your favorite looks that you've ever seen?
Oh,
That's a
wow.
hard one.
Hard. Well, I wish I would have met Anna Piaggi because I never got to photograph her. Oh, so many outfits. Valerie von Sobel is one of the women that I photograph who's like really, I think, probably one of the best dressed women I've ever seen in my life. I mean, we walk through a department store and people are gasping at her beauty and what she wears. And it's so inventive. There was a woman in Milan one time that I just missed because she turned the corner too quick, and it still haunts me. She had gray hair, and she was wearing like red, yellow, and blue, like a suit um, that was beautifully tailored. And then she had like red, yellow, and blue makeup, like eyeshadow, lipstick, um, and then jewelry and a headpiece. But it was like done in a very elegant Italian way. And like she still is like one of the ones that got away. So that kind of haunts me. Um,
Sounds incredible. I love a like a primary color moment.
The reason why I'm wearing these today is one of my ladies that has passed now, but we used to call her the Countess of Glamour. Her name was Lindell, and she was one of the first women that I photographed that reminded me of someone from my drawings. And she wore like this kind of gold uh, top and matching pants and gold shoes. And she had a necklace like this of huge gold baubles, but she wore it kind of close to this. And it was a better necklace than this, with a gold turban and gold jewelry. And that is always one of my favorite outfits. And then, so many of the women like either like make things or, you know, recycle things in their wardrobes that they've had for years or um shop at vintage stores and thrift stores. Yeah, so there's so many outfits that I love. Judith has this like 1930s rhinestone cape that's like uh
Yeah, you're saying
incredible.
all the right words there. 1930s rhinestones. Okay, I'm locked in. Um,
Hervey, Sephora. I mean, all these women, they have like it's like so many of their looks are incredible. Like it's hard to think of just one that is like the one.
I gasped when you mentioned Valerie because when I asked you that question, I had her in mind. Some of my favorite outfits from your photos, a lot of them are from her. She has just like top tier style. Like that's the style that I kind of aim for at some point.
Yeah, it's
She is
hard to
just
it's hard. Yeah, she's
a
really
cut
incredible.
above.
And she like takes risks, and
Mm,
she's like so avant-garde in what she does. Like I mean, for so many of them, it's like part of their art.
mm. I think that's another thing I like about seeing these images is like I like seeing people that have just stayed committed to a look their whole life, and it gives me hope that it will never go away. Because you see these things and you think, oh, I hope I'm like that when I'm older. But the reality of a lot of people is that they just don't. So I just
Yeah.
love to see people that carry that torch to the end. You mentioned the necklace of one of your muses that had passed. That must be quite a difficult part of your work, is that kind of element of mortality. How do you navigate that?
Yeah, I think because the project kind of started with the loss of my grandmother, which I never thought I could even deal with because like how important she was to me, Bluma, that once I got through that, it sort of like made me realize that I could handle what might happen obviously with the work that I do.
Mhm.
And yeah, I've lost a lot of women, but it's like such an honor to be able to like kind of create this legacy where like people have been inspired by them and shared their stories, and they live on through the project and through the photos, and people still talk about these women to me when I travel and go places and how they've inspired them. And then just hearing from their family members about how Advanced Style has helped their you know family members like during as the women have gotten older. But yeah, it's hard. It's because uh they're like, I feel so connected to these women because it's hard to find people my own age who like have same sense of humor, like appreciate old things, antiques, vintage, and all the things that I love. And I feel like so much of that culture is disappearing already. And like there's a soulfulness about a lot of the women that I photograph that and like just being like alive in a time before the internet, which obviously has given us such great opportunities, or else I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing.
Mm.
But yeah, it's definitely very difficult. Um, and it's going to be hard as I continue. But just being able to like see them on my phone and watch videos, it really helps.
Yeah, absolutely. I always wondered about that because obviously you do a lot of street style, but I do see you really build
Oh.
relationships with these women, and I love to see your stories where you're meeting up for your lunch dates and this and that. So I was just really intrigued by that aspect of your work that maybe is the sort of
Yeah.
harder side of it.
Yeah,
It's
and
a
I
real
mean,
part of the aging process. And as much as you want to reveal like, the advanced love, advanced pets, and all of the vitality, there is like the other side of that.
oh, totally. And I have done videos where I talk to women about death and dying, and we have like conversations like sharing about how they feel about it. And I think that's so important to just talk about this stuff because it's the reality of obviously having the privilege of getting older. And so I think like I really want to talk more about that kind of thing. And at the same time, uh I think the reason why I was talking about all the positive aspects is because I feel like it was more the other things that were focused on in aging, and not the positive aspects. And
Absolutely.
but it definitely yeah, it's always like amazing when I can have conversations like that with the women. And like I think even Judith has shared some videos about it, and my friend Joyce, we've shared a few videos, and I was working on a little project about that. And so a lot of the women I'm talking to now who are in their 90s, they're like, we talk on the phone, they're like, I'm like, well, I'll see you in New York next month. And they're like, well, maybe you will, maybe you won't. I may not be here. And I'm like, oh, you're gonna be there. We're gonna go out and have a good time. But, they're like, it's interesting hearing about how they're have accepted it and are ready to go. And I think because that sort of makes it easier on the people who love them, is knowing like when if they've accepted it, like it just makes it easier to sort of let them
Mm.
go.
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna say it's funny. It's not funny, but in West Indian culture, my family's Caribbean. That's like a very common thing. If you're talking to somebody older, they'll be like, "How are you?" We're like, "Oh, I'm good, just waiting for God." Like it's very common to constantly
Yeah.
speak in that way. Um, even when like, if I try to give you money, you'll be like, no, no, but it's fine. I've paid for my box. You're like, oh, okay, like, but it's very normal way of conversing in our culture. It's yeah, it's very open dialogue. Has it made it more comforting for you? Do you feel like your perception of your own mortality has kind of changed since you started this project?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because I haven't like thought about it a lot. And yeah, I think that once like you've gotten to a point where like you've been such a vibrant person and done so much, and I'm talking for these a lot of these women are so lucky that it doesn't happen until they're like in their 90s. And so like when you can't continue to do the things that bring you joy, and you're struggling and have pain, like I think like seeing the process of someone saying like yeah, that they are okay with not being here anymore, which is like a very hard thing to talk about and be in the,
Absolutely.
but yeah, I think it's like it is very helpful, and it has helped me. Yeah. I mean, I think the hard thing is thinking about like dying alone. For me, I don't
Right.
have children. And yeah, that's I think probably like and just seeing like the different journeys that the women have taken, and like uh you know how their life choices affected like where they are at certain stages. And so I like, community becomes very important.
What you create
Friend.
with your work. So that's a
Yeah.
huge, like full circle thing. I never used to be scared of death at all when I was younger. I think you just think you're
No.
invincible. Since having my son, it's like it keeps me up at night every night.
Oh yeah.
Like
Yeah, of
I'm the most
course.
cautious person on earth now. That's why I ask, wow, this conversation is
Yeah.
really taking the turn.
That's okay.
I was like, let's talk about something light. What's your top three looks? Oh, now we're on mortality. The
But
next
good. I think it's important to share all this.
Absolutely. And I think that's why so many people of all ages feel so connected to what you do and why it's been so successful, because you're having the conversations that nobody else is having. And you're not just talking about people, you're having the conversations with the people you're talking about, which is the most important layer. I think you see so much media, especially aimed at women, that's like, for decades and decades and decades, these articles about aging and this and anti-aging and
Oh yeah.
health and beauty and wellness, but they're always written by people in their 20s and 30s. And it's kind of like when you look at the journalists, it's nice to hear from the actual people, which, yeah, I think that's the brilliant thing about your project and why
Thank you.
it's so beloved and it's stood the test of time. It's still going, which a lot of the blogs from 2008 are not still going. So I think it's really impressive. And I'm just so happy that your work exists. I really, really am a big fan.
Thank you so much. I'm a fan of yours.
How has witnessing these incredible, stylish women's fashion impacted your own style journey from the beginning?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I always loved dressing up when I was younger, and I think that as I got a little bit older, like maybe I was made fun of for that, and like I might have toned it down a little bit, and then I got back into it, and then college I really got into it because I had like found a group of friends who loved vintage and all that. But then as I was like sort of looking for a partner, maybe I toned it down again. And with the the women doing advanced style, I look back and like in the early days moving to New York. Well, first of all my clothing got stolen out of my car right before I moved to New York City. And so I moved to New York with no clothes, but also I think I was like putting such a focus on the women that I tended to not like really express myself how I wanted to, or like it was just like a lot of focus on the project and like kind of, putting a spotlight on these women. And so I didn't tend to like really feel like I wanted or needed to like be, someone that stood out, even though that was like in me.
Mhm.
Uh, and then as I got older through the project and like kind of even like took more and more inspiration from the women, and made a little money here and there, like was able to like thrift and do a little more vintage shopping and had more space. And yeah, I've like kind of like come more into my own again and like really love dressing and I always have, but now I think more than ever, like especially during COVID, I really, really, really went for it when I was locked up. Um, uh, but yeah, I mean, now it's just like it's always been one of my favorite things, but I think more than ever it is.
That's good. I'm glad that you're at the point where you're in this look that you're in now. I just think, was it Deanna Vreeland that said style should be what gets you out of bed in the morning? And I fully think that's true, actually.
It's a good one.
hmm I realized that postpartum. I was like, okay, now I understand why she said that because it was only when I started getting dressed again that I was like, oh, I'm a person again.
I remember getting a message from a woman who, a relative of a woman who, uh, was in a nursing home, and her relative had brought her one of my books, and then she all of a sudden like told them to go up into her basement or attic or wherever it was and go grab all her old scarves and pins. And then, from, then on, she was like started to dress up again in the place that she was. And so that was like really special to hear.
Yeah, and it's nice to hear that even she's already at the nursing home, but there's still reason to get inspired and try something new. Even, do you know what I mean? Like it's amazing. The work is amazing. Thank you so much for sitting down with me today. I will look out for Advanced Pets November 12th.
But
um,
it can be pre-ordered now.
Pre-order now. You heard the man. Any parting words?
No, I just can't wait to see the interview only because I want to see you. I'm not going to want to see myself.
And it's so funny you say you're going to be there to watch me because I really edit out everything that I say and I just focus on.
No.
No, I am in it, but I try to be like a woman of few words
You're
when
the
I'm not
favorite part
actually.
of my favorite part of the interviews. I really like, and I don't feel like I'm that person who like is fun to watch or listen to, but you really are, and that's why I wanted to do this. I think so you should share your voice because it's like maybe I should think this about myself. I just don't, but um because you're the reason that people are opening up, and it's your personality and your interest. Like you can detect like a genuine interest. Like it's not like some just like, regular interview. Like you really like, and that's what I do too. Like I'm really interested in the people that I photograph. So
That's it. I think that's the thank you, first of all. Don't make me cry on this bloody Monday afternoon. I always say this, people are lucky that I'm not a crier, or I would cry at every single interview because people are so kind. Um, but yeah, I think that's the good thing about when you can like the internet and that you can make your own projects is that you can just find people that you're genuinely passionate about and there's no network telling you have to talk to this person and you have to do this. You can just really like geek out and that's what I love to do. I just like to be a fangirl and get all the stories and share them with other
yeah,
obsessives.
love
Um,
it.
but but yeah, enjoy the rest of your day, and
You.
I will let you know when this is out, and we'll definitely have to do another one in the future
I'd love to meet
if we don't
you.
get our TV show before then.
Yes. Perfect. Bye bye.
Bye.